Welcome back to The Ed Show. Fixing health care in this country is a moral obligation. There isn't any way around it. At least that's how I see it, and I think the public option to make health care affordable and accessible is a key fulfilling moral obligation in this country. But some religious leaders don't agree with me on that. Take, for example, Catholic leaders in Kansas City who teamed up to put out this letter about health care reform with this statement. The teaching of the Universal Church has never been to suggest a government socialization of medical services. Rather, the Church has asserted the rights of every individual to have access to those things most necessary for sustaining and caring for human life, while at the same time insisting on the personal responsibility of each individual to care properly for his or her own health. Joining me now for the main event is Tony Perkins. He is the president of the Family Research Council. Mr. Perkins, nice to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Ed.
I am somewhat surprised at the silence of many religious leaders in this country. The president has been on record. He believes we have a moral obligation. What's your position on this? Do we as a country have a moral obligation to get health care to Americans?
Well, Ed, first off, let me say I do believe we have some problems in our health care system in America today. And I would agree with you that we do have a moral obligation to care for our neighbors. This is where we disagree. The issue is the selective lifting of Scripture, of the teachings of Jesus, like from Matthew chapter 25 that Al Gore used over the weekend, that are actually teachings to the church and to fellow Christians, followers of Jesus, to care for others. And I'm thankful that that has historically been the view, because it was churches and religious people who established the hospitals in this country, and we do have an obligation to care for the poor, but it's not the government's obligation. And to read the government
we are the government. The people are the government, and if we make a conscious decision to use our money to give everybody health care, what would be wrong with that?
Well, I'm glad we didn't have that view early on in this country, because it was not the government that established the hospitals and the institutions of higher learning. It was religious institutions.
Well,
it was
Tony,
people
back then they weren't gouging people, and it wasn't for profit back then. The point is, we've got a sick nation right now, morally and physically. And I take issue with the hard right conservatives, religious leaders. You're after the, not you, well, whatever, you're after the marriage amendment, okay? You're after Roe v. Wade, but silent on this issue.
No, that's not true. We've not been silent on this. In fact, you were talking about that young mother earlier.
Sure.
You know, she could qualify under S-chips. Her 2-year-old could get health care in this country. You know, when you talk about that 47 million, there's only about 12 million of those who actually can't afford health care. The others fall into different categories.
Well, actually, not to change the facts here, Tony, she doesn't qualify. We checked that out. She doesn't qualify for S-chip.
Well, she must make more than $50,000.
She's still a single mom trying to get involved, and she's looking for affordable health care.
Her child can't.
There is discrimination going on in this country. If you don't have money, you can't get proper health care. And I just don't think that religiously, morally, we're not serving this country and the people the way we should. We've made a decision as a people to do something, and the conservatives are stopping it.
No, I'd be happy to work with you to resolve many of these issues on health care, and I think they can be done. But this is the issue where the president and others are using Scripture and applying it to the state when it really is not to be applied to the state.
You do it with a marriage amendment?
Look, there's a double standard here.
You guys have done it. President Bush did it with a marriage amendment.
Then there's this double standard. When a conservative uses Scripture, the media goes into convulsions saying they're trying to create a theocracy. When the liberals use Scripture, they just report it, I guess, because they know they don't mean it. I mean, in fact, in 2005, you talk about the marriage amendment, 2005, when Bill Frist was the majority leader in the Senate, he attended one of our church-based events. John Kerry went ballistic on the Senate floor, saying he was trying to inject religion into a public policy debate where it did not belong. There's a double standard here.
I'm talking about leadership. Now, people can lead, and when you have the pulpit and you have the visibility and you write the books and you got these mega churches, you have to admit, Tony, that Rick Warren, Joel Osteen, Franklin Graham, and also Pat Robertson, they're nowhere to be found on health care reform. And I don't want to call them hypocritical, but they are ominously silent, and they are the Christian leaders in this country.
I can't speak for them, but I can tell you that a year ago when I published my book with Harry Jackson, it's a chapter in our book on health care reform. We've put ideas out there on how to do it, and we do believe we have a collective responsibility to do it, but we don't believe a government takeover of the health care system is a solution. And using Scripture like silly putty to wrap around radical ideas.
So
is not going to be sold to the Christian community.
So you're saying that we don't have a moral obligation?
No,
I mean, either we
that.
do or we don't. As a country, we do or we don't.
Look, trying to give it off to the government is an abdication of personal responsibility. We have a personal responsibility, and the church has a responsibility in this, and I'm glad they've lived up to it in the past, and they need to live up to it today.
Tony Perkins, always a pleasure. I appreciate your conversation tonight.
Thanks, Ed.
You bet.